When it comes to stereo imaging plugins, none is better in my opinion than Izotope Ozone's Imager plugin. This is an amazing tool that I like to use in all of my mixes in some sort of capacity. Now, stereo imaging is definitely something that you need to be delicate with, and I find that a lot of people, when they're first queuing it up, they're going way too aggressively. They're pushing and pulling things in all kinds of directions. Either it's causing a lot of problems in their mixes and they're leaving it, or they just abandon it and don't use it at all because they're not getting what they want out of it. Well, maybe you're someone that has access to this plugin, but you haven't really been able to figure out how to properly utilize it, and you've been getting some mixed results in the process. Well, I wanted to shoot this video today for you to show you how I specifically like to use this plugin in my sessions and give you a couple of key takeaways that you can use to implement into your own. Are you ready? Let's go. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is your boy 5-Piece producer and engineer extraordinaire. Thank you for checking out this video. I'm really excited to talk about the Izotope Ozone Imager and how you can incorporate it into your mixes. So let's actually just jump into Pro Tools and I'll show you what's going on. So I've got a session here from an artist named Sorry. The track is called Working On Me. If you like what you hear as you watch this video, I will leave a link to it in the description below so you can listen to it on the streaming platform of your choice. Now, before we actually get into it, I want to just explain how things are set up, and I want to really tell you why I use the stereo imager in this case, so you have the right mind frame when you approach this on your own. Now, in this case, I have my instrumental master here, so this is the beat, as you can imagine, and then I have my a cappella master. This is where all my individual vocal tracks flow up to, and on each of these tracks, I've applied a stereo imager. Ultimately, what I was trying to do was use this imager as an extension of sidechain compression and strategic EQ to make more space for the vocal. I felt like the instrumental and the vocal, while they were mixed well, they were still slightly getting in the way of each other, and I wanted to create a little bit more separation. And at times, we can use stereo imaging as a way to sort of enhance that or ensure that that happens. So with that being said, let me play this really quickly and show you what it sounds like with and without this stereo imager on both channels.
Meditate, meditate. I feel like my soul is about to detonate. Gathering my thoughts, watch them accumulate. While I'm blocking out this world like a barricade. Let me chill, give me time, give me emotions, find a ladder, let him climb. I need better, I deserve it. God put me down for my good, yeah, I'm worth it. Meditate, meditate. I feel like my soul is about to detonate. Gathering my thoughts, watch them accumulate. While I'm blocking out this world like a barricade. Let me chill, give me time, give me emotions, find a ladder, let him climb. I need better, I deserve it. God put me down for my good, yeah, I'm worth it.
So it's a pretty subtle change. This is not really doing some crazy heavy lifting, but it's definitely creating a little bit more space for the a cappella to dominate a little bit more over specific frequency pockets of the instrumental. But let's go into each of these channels and overview what I did and how I went about thinking about this. So this is the imager on top of my a cappella master. Now, the first thing that I want to mention to you guys is in terms of where to place stereo imagers, I usually place them at the very end of the chain, but before my final limiting. I do this because I don't want anything else to follow it and undermine what I've done here. Sometimes you do certain stereo processing, and then plugins that you put on after can sort of undo what you did or create additional issues. I like to save stereo imaging for essentially the second last step ahead of limiting, because limiting and that stuff is really just going to drive the volume further and make it a little bit louder. So whenever you're placing this, definitely try to keep it towards the end of the chain to avoid any additional issues, phase issues, and things like that. Now, another thing that I should mention as a tip here is notice how far I'm pushing things. Whether I'm pushing or pulling them, notice how nothing is excessive. When I first got this plugin years ago, I was always making some crazy maneuvers, and usually I was pushing things to the wide side, right? When I push stuff this way, this is making it wider. When I pull it this way, it's actually doing the opposite. It's making it more narrow. And I found that when I would first use this plugin, I would always be pushing things wider like this. And I would go really crazy doing a move of 100 or, pretty high up there, right? Now, with me personally, I find that if you do that, you're going to create a lot of issues for yourself. You're going to create a lot of phase issues and also issues with mono compatibility. Mono compatibility is super important because people are not always perfectly centered between two different listening places places, so they're not always listening to like a speaker on a left and right. You know, they might be sitting in a car where they're sitting a little bit more on the left side if you're in the western part of the world, and they're therefore closer to the left speaker in the car, and now you're not really getting a perfect stereo image as you might have when you're mixing a song, right? You have to be mindful of this for people. Or imagine that someone is in a club and they're standing closer to one speaker and they're not even near the other one. They're not getting a perfect stereo image, and by pushing things too far, you're going to be really enhancing the stereo image, but at the same time creating a lot of problems for mono compatibility. That'll lead to things sounding washed out or not so clear, might create phase issues, and a whole bunch of other problems that you're definitely going to want to avoid. Don't go too crazy pushing things either direction, especially at first. Instead, focus on doing small, subtle moves. I find that pushing things to 15 to 30, usually less than 30, but 15 to 30 in general is like the most that I'll ever go in either direction, and even 30 is pretty aggressive. I don't really do that anymore. I find that I'm really sticking to that 15 kind of range at the most, and I'm able to get a lot out of whatever I'm applying this to. And you can see that here. I'm not really going too much further than that boundary that I'm talking about. The other thing that I want to mention too is if you don't use the stereoize button here at the bottom, which is already not enabled from the beginning, you're really not going to be utilizing these features at all. You could kind of trick yourself into thinking that you're doing something, but you need to actually press stereoize in order for these bands to take effect. So definitely make sure you're pressing this. And there is two different modes. The second mode is the newer one, and the first one is sort of the traditional mode that they've had since I think Izotope Ozone 5. Basically, one works for most things. Two works if you're using it on more dynamic material, if you want to preserve more transients and stuff. It might be a little bit better suited to that. So on master, on groups and stuff like that, you may want to switch to the second mode because it's maybe a little bit more accurate and creates less problems for you. So specifically what I did on this track, just to get back to it for a moment here, is I'm really going to be focusing on this mid band. This 1000 to 6000, let's say, is the section that I've cordoned off here. And if I solo this and play it, let's take a listen to what we're getting here.
Meditate, meditate. I feel like my soul is about to detonate.
So this is like the fundamental of the vocal, right? It's the main part of the vocal, I should say. It's really where a lot of the energy is concentrated. Vocals are usually mono, right? We're usually recording one single mic, and that mic should be like centered and just that one artist. And sure, there might be some backgrounds and stuff, but we really want this area, I would say, to be pretty focused. So what I like to do is I like to actually narrow this band on my master. Once again, that's what you see happening here. I've taken it down -16, so it's actually making it a little bit more mono, a little bit more narrow. It's not perfectly mono, though. If I play this and we pay attention here, you're going to see the stereo image.
Gathering my thoughts, watch them accumulate.
It's pretty mono, but it's not the most mono it could be, right? Just for example purposes, if I drag this all the way down to -100, we look at it again, you're going to see it should be just a straight line down the middle.
While I'm blocking out this world like a barricade.
It also sounds more mono. Roughly to -16 was where I put it, and this allows it to be a little bit more focused. Just this band, once again, the top and the low bands, these are not actually being affected by this move. These have their own unique moves, as you could tell. The high band is the other band that I would focus on specifically for vocals. And the high band I would actually focus on maybe pushing a little bit. You can see I've added it and made it a little bit wider, right? This might give this illusion that things are a little bit more shiny or pristine, fills in the space a little bit better, but let's just check this out.
Yeah, I'm worth it, upgraded me forever. Cold mind, but my heart stay warm like a sweater. Where I'm going, there's no telling. Stepping out is pain that I used to dwell in. It's been a long time coming, legs still.
And again, sticking to a pretty minimal type of move, 19 in this case seemed to be pretty cool. Now on the low band, I always advise taking it and narrowing it a little bit if you can. Humans, we're really bad at detecting bass, and we don't usually want bass to be super stereo. Sometimes it's cool as an effect on an actual bass sound, but making it really easy to detect and keeping it as centered as possible is usually your best bet. So from 200 and below, I generally focus this a little bit more, make it more narrow. And these frequencies don't always matter, at least for a vocal, because this is really going to be dominated by the instrumental. But let me just show you what we got going on.
Working on me. Oh, I've been.
And then the low mid, this is always going to depend for me. Sometimes I push it, some days I pull it and make it more narrow. It just always depends. In this case, I'm pushing it a little bit, and I usually will push it if I am detracting or at least narrowing the main fundamental of the vocal. But just so you guys know how to set it up, I would recommend literally just take the band, push it one way, pull it the other way, and go aggressive on both sides. Do what I basically told you not to do. Push it to 100. Do you prefer that? Or pull it down to minus 100 and see if you prefer that. Which one do you prefer more between the two extremes? And then based on that, go that direction. So let's say that I preferred when I pushed it, I'm going to go up and just increase it, you know? But then being mindful again to not go too crazy and just listen, A, B, bypass, and make sure that whatever I'm doing is actually enhancing what I'm applying it to. In this case, I'm applying it and enhancing a little bit to basically make up for what I'm losing or narrowing here. And that way you're getting a little bit of a push, pull, right? A little bit of a yin and yang action there. And of course, making sure that this sounds good. So let's actually just A-B it real quick with and without this, just the a cappella soloed.
Meditate, meditate. I feel like my soul is about to detonate. Gathering my thoughts, watch them accumulate. While I'm blocking out this world like a barricade. Let me chill, give me time. Emotions find a ladder, let them climb. I need better, I deserve it. God brought me down for my good, yeah, I'm worth it. Meditate, meditate. I feel like my soul is about to detonate. Gathering my thoughts, watch them accumulate. While I'm blocking out this world like a barricade. Let me chill, give me time. Emotions find a ladder, let them climb.
It's pretty subtle, but it's definitely noticeable, and especially for me because I'm wearing headphones, I really notice what's going on. But you can really tell that it just sounds a bit more open. I think that's maybe the best way to say it. It sounds a little bit more open. Things are not as on top of each other, and especially the effects, right? The reverbs, the delays, those things always live in the stereo field as is, and by enhancing this, especially enhancing the high end, I'm actually able to get that clarity a little bit better, a little bit more of that air and openness from those effects, and just overall enhance the vocal, but very subtly and not create any problems in the process. Now, in terms of the instrumental, let's talk about that and what I did here. And this is going to kind of be the opposite in a lot of ways. You can see that I've covered a lot of the same bands. I got 4 bands, I got stereo eyes on, and you can see that the actual band width is once again in line with those principles I said of not going too crazy, sticking within that 15 to 30 kind of range in either direction. But each band I'm definitely processing differently. It's not exactly the same. It's not perfectly replicating what I did on the acapella. I don't want that. I actually need this to be doing something different. And the first thing we want to focus on is this mid-high band. I want this to actually be pushing it and making it wider. So if you remember on the acapella, we had the opposite. We had it actually becoming more narrow. We're collapsing it. But then on the instrumental, we want to push it and make it wider. What that does is it makes the vocal a little bit more mono and easier to hear and a little bit more direct. And then the instrumental is going to be a little bit more wider and flush around it, right? It should really create space for the vocal to be heard and felt a little bit more so than if I didn't have this process on it. So with this, I'm only pushing it a touch. About 8.9 is what I'm pushing this setting to. And you're going to see how this is really making a bit of a difference. Let me actually unmute the acapella and play it for a moment with and without this band on its own.
Meditate, meditate. I feel like my soul is about to detonate. Gathering my thoughts, watch them accumulate. While I'm blocking out this world like a barricade. Let me chill, give me time. Emotions find a ladder, let them climb. I need better, I deserve it. God brought me down for my good, yeah, I'm worth it. Meditate, meditate. I feel like my soul is about to detonate. Gathering my thoughts, watch them accumulate. While I'm blocking out this world like a barricade. Let me chill, give me time. Emotions find a ladder, let them climb. I need better, I deserve it. God brought me down for my good, yeah, I'm worth it. Meditate, meditate.
You kind of get it. I decided to move it around a little bit just to exaggerate and really show you. You could hear how it could create some problems. Sounded a little bit more thin in a way. Some of the instrument sounds felt a little bit more thin when I started to push it, a little bit more washed out, especially when I started getting beyond 15, I would say, you know, to that 20 kind of area. But even 8.9 where it was, I could stand to just pull it a little bit more upwards to make it a little bit wider and not really suffer any negative consequences. But you should overall hear how it's just getting those instruments a little bit more out of the way from the actual vocal. And again, this is not something that should be relied on its own. You should definitely be using this in conjunction with other processes, you know, sidechain compression and strategic EQ, especially frequency masking related stuff. I'll definitely leave some links to these videos that talk about these steps either above right now or in the description below, because those will definitely help you get more separation if you are struggling with getting the instrumental and acapella to mesh better with each other and stay out of each other's way. Now, the other bands, the low, mid, and high band, I've definitely pushed or pulled them their own specific direction selections, again, this is specific to the material, but the low band in general, you always want to focus on keeping more mono, similar to what I was saying about the acapella. We want to make sure that the bass and low end is very directional, but sometimes you don't want to pull it fully down to -100. Sometimes it makes sense to do that, but sometimes you do have like a stereo bass or certain things that you want to make sure are still preserved and have somewhat of that feeling, because at the same time as we are making it more mono, sometimes it can detract from the volume and the impact of a sound, so I don't want to make a crazy move by pulling it downward. Now the low mid and the very top band I'm obviously enhancing as well. The high band I feel like we can always enhance a little bit. It's going to just create a little bit more width and airiness similar to the acapella, and then this low mid band I'm definitely pushing it upwards as well, I should say, to get a little bit more enhancement, but as you can tell, we're not going crazy with these moves. So let's actually just once again bypass and put this in and see how different does the instrumental sound on its own. Here we go. Pretty subtle at the same time, but I definitely hear it, especially in these top kind of bands. I hear it a lot like on the clap and the percussion and some of the more upper harmonic kind of stuff. The airiness, the openness, it's all there. And again, it's not like super drastic night and day difference, but it is definitely noticeable and makes the track sound better as a whole. So this is one of my favorite ways to use the Izotope Imager in my sessions, obviously on my submasters specifically. Now, I know some of you guys are probably wondering, do I use this on an individual sound? So would I put it on like a snare or a synth or some sort of individual track? Maybe, but not always. I'd much rather rely on a bunch of other different processes for that. I got some specific techniques that I use to enhance stereo width that doesn't rely on these tools. And I definitely find that it can create a lot of issues, as I mentioned. So I'd much rather use panning and some of these other techniques that I've talked about rather than using this Izotope Imager on an individual sound. But I find for buses and groups and masters, it's a great thing as long as you're using it delicately and not pushing things too far in either direction, making it too wide or too narrow, making sure that you're utilizing this actual stereoize function. Otherwise, it's not even working and you're just deceiving yourself. And of course, applying it to a bus or a group, which is affecting sort of the collection of all the sounds that feed to it rather than an individual sound. You could definitely still process individual sounds if you like to. I just found in the past I would do way more harm than good, so I've decided to stop doing that and use more appropriate techniques in the process. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please smash that like button until it turns blue. I'd really appreciate that, because it'll not only help this video do better in the long run, but it'll help the YouTube algorithm know to show you more of my helpful content in the process. And if you're new here and you haven't subscribed before, what are you waiting on? If you found this video helpful, definitely subscribe, because I got tons of content just like this all on my channel, always focused on helping you sound better and helping you make more money with your music. I drop a new video every week, and I'd love to continue helping you on this journey. I just ask you pay the small fee, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and you'll be sure to see some more content in the coming weeks. All right. You want to see anything specific? Leave it in the comments below, and I'm looking forward to helping you again on the next one. All right. Peace.
5